We're so glad to have you here today. Just as a reminder, here are your presenters. My name is Cherie, and I'm joined by my co-facilitator, Devin, and we are so happy to support you as your wellness coaches and facilitators. So just as a reminder of what Making Peace with Food is all about, this 4-week program is about really understanding emotional eating, really getting to know our patterns. What are our triggers? How do we choose the foods that we use to satisfy us when we have a trigger? Why do we choose these foods? Also, we want to improve our relationship with food. And we said in session 1 that behavior change is a process that requires patience and consistency. We are that kid on the bike. So rather than placing judgment on ourselves when things get tough, maybe we get off track, we're going to give ourselves grace. Just as a reminder of what the 4 sessions are all about, last time we talked about cultivating a healthy relationship with food, and this time we're going to talk about triggers for eating and cognitive behavioral therapy. Next session is about body image, self-care, and managing emotions without food. And then our 4th session is all about intuitive eating or the anti-diet. How can we start to trust ourselves and trust our body's cues so that we can rely on those cues to do what's best for our bodies? How can we get to know our hunger and our fullness so that we can really make peace with our food and experience food freedom? So remember, the goal is progress, not perfection. And this series is a short one. This journey continues long after these 4 sessions. So if you'd like support, feel free to reach out to Integrated Behavioral Health to continue this journey. We can work with a wellness coach. We're all happy to support you. So let's dive into this session. Just as a reminder, this is our agreement. When we're sharing out, we're sharing headlines only. We're respecting your privacy and we're respecting others' privacy. So please only share things that you feel comfortable sharing, things that you don't mind others knowing. And then we want to hear what has worked for you rather than the shoulds, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, because those are examples of thought distortions. Audio check-ins are always welcome. Cameras are optional. And then any other thoughts are welcome too. So first we're going to have a mindful minute. And this mindful minute is going to help us to get grounded during this session because we're pulled in so many different directions in our lives. We're hoping that each time we practice some form of mindfulness during these sessions, that you'll get a chance to see, does this tool fit into my toolbox for future support? So let's go ahead and do an activity called box breathing, or it's also called elevator breathing. And the reason for that is we're going to breathe in for 4 counts. We'll hold our breath for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold our breath for 4 counts. So it's just like a box or like an elevator going up a floor, staying there, down a floor, staying there. It's amazing how quickly box breathing can change how we feel. And because we're doing it in that steady pace, you might choose to do it with music. So let's go ahead and get comfortable in our seats. We want to support our bodies, but we don't want to be tense or rigid. And so first take a few breaths at your own pace. So I'm just going to breathe in and out. You can close your eyes, keep them open and gaze softly, whatever is most comfortable for you. And now we will begin doing a few box breaths. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, hold, breathe out. Hold. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, and hold. All right. So now we're going to come back into our virtual room. You might choose to stretch. I know I like to stretch after these and just kind of shake it out. Whatever feels good for your body. Maybe roll your shoulders. And now let's reflect on how you feel. We just did 4 box breaths. That was it. This truly was a mindful minute. So, how do you feel after engaging in this mindful minute? Let's take a moment to reflect on that. Some people feel more grounded, more focused, more calm, more ready to receive information. Some feel at peace. Some feel more aware. I'm hoping that you're feeling a little bit better. So now let's go into our check-in. What went well last week? What was challenging? And what's on your mind today? And remember, when you're reflecting on these things, when you're thinking about how last week went, we said that we're just experimenting. That's all we're doing. When we set a goal, what we're really doing is thinking of a little baby step that we can take towards our vision for ourselves. And we wanted that baby step to be related to our self-care. It was something related to what gives us value, meaning, and purpose in life. Because if we can fill ourselves up with those things that give us value, meaning, and purpose, then food doesn't have to be the thing to fill that void. So let's just take a moment and think, what did go well? And if you're having trouble thinking about that, give yourself credit. You were in this session. So what went well was you carved out this time for you and you're making your health a priority. So if nothing else, know that that's huge. So what went well? What was challenging? And what is on your mind today? So I'll give you some time to think about that. I know many people like to set goals around maybe doing a little more physical activity. Maybe it's around building stronger relationships with family, being more socially connected. Some people like to drink more water. So any movement we make in those directions counts as a win. And even if we didn't feel like we made a lot of movement, the fact that we're trying, that is always a win. All right. So now that you've reflected, let's go ahead and move forward. So today is about triggers to eating and cognitive behavioral therapy. So why again are we doing this 4-week series? Well, what we want to do is to learn what to do in place of emotional eating because emotions are a part of life. Emotions are in every part of life. And so we're always going to have emotions. We're going to have strong emotional responses to certain things. Life is full of stressors. Life is full of challenges. So if we always rely on food to improve our mood, then it's going to be difficult to reach our health goals. So we want to find other strategies for managing our emotions and for feeling better. We want to learn that there are things that we can do to manage our stress other than eating. And that's part of why we do those mindful minutes too, so we can see just how quickly we can change how we feel. We want to slow down when we're eating to give our brain a chance to connect with our stomach. Our stomach's filling up and sends signals to our brain saying, I'm getting full, I'm getting full. But that process takes about 20 minutes. So we want to slow down when we're biologically hungry. And we're going to learn more about the difference between biological and emotional hunger. And we want to be okay with leaving food on our plate. Now, that is a common challenge. I know many people in making peace with food say, hey, I didn't grow up that way. And I know that for me also, I didn't grow up that way. I always knew that I needed to clean my plate because it was wasteful. It wasn't showing gratitude. Maybe by me not eating my food, someone in a different country is starving. And so we can have a lot of guilt with leaving food on our plate. But now we're in a place where we get to set our own rules, and it's for this bigger picture, which is for our health. So we want to be okay with that. And if we struggle with that, then we might just decide, well, maybe I'll never quite feel comfortable leaving food on my plate, but what I can do is serve up smaller portions to start and then go back if I'm hungry rather than a big portion to start. And then we want to improve our relationship with food. And part of that, like we said in the first session, is giving ourselves permission to eat the things that are physically and emotionally pleasing for us. We know that all foods can fit into a healthy lifestyle, but the ones that are more nourishing for us are going to get us to our health goals more so than the ones that are less nourishing for us. So we want to improve our relationship. We also, just as a reminder from last week, are taking away food labels. So we're not saying this food's good, that one's bad, this one's forbidden, that one's my guilty pleasure. All of those labels make it easier for us to want to binge on foods because what happens is we have that rebellious teenager in our brain who says, "Oh, I'm not supposed to eat this, so now that's all I want." So the way that we quiet that rebellious teenager in our brain is we say, oh, you can have it. Yeah, if you want it, you can have it. That makes it less exciting for us. So then we're less likely to binge. We want to learn more about emotional eating and food addiction. So we did talk about that last time too. And we want to get off of this roller coaster, the feast or famine approach. So maybe we did engage in some emotional eating and we feel that physical and emotional discomfort rather than telling ourselves, okay, now I'm not going to eat because I'm punishing myself. Instead of doing that, we want to say, okay, I'm getting back on track. I'm doing a mental reset. Today is a new day. I'm going to nourish my body. Um, and so that's really an important part of this process. And then we want to understand how we use food as a reward and practice healthier behaviors. Some of us might have grown up, for me, if I finished my homework when I was in elementary school on Fridays, I would be on the list for an ice cream party. So I was like, yes, met my goals, therefore I get ice cream. Or, oh, I did so good at the doctor, so the doctor gives me a lollipop. Or, oh, I went to the dentist, so I'm going to celebrate by getting an ice cream cone. Or my sports team did great, my elementary school sports team. So my team, since we won, we get a pizza party. So we start to learn that food is a reward. And so we want to find other ways to reward ourselves besides food. Because as we start to set goals, an important part of behavior change is rewarding ourselves. But if the reward we choose is food, then it can be counterproductive. So when we make changes in our behavior, we want to give ourselves a reward. And the best reward is a pat on the back. It's that recognition that we made a change. So thinking about healthy rewards, rewards that are aligned with our goals rather than rewards that might be counterproductive. So, what are some common triggers for eating? Well, here are just a few. Maybe you have some other ideas because you know yourself best, but here are some common ones. Tension. So, if we're feeling pressure, we're feeling stress, this might be our way to relieve some stress in the moment. We're feeling uncomfortable, feeling sad, anxious, depressed, unhappy. Bored. It was so common for people to say, you know what? I realized boredom is a big trigger for me during COVID when we had to stay home. And so since we were just steps away from the fridge, it was easy to go and look in and see what's there, even when we weren't hungry. Or maybe it's the end of the day. Maybe we had a challenging day, or maybe we're just tired. And so we're celebrating that we got through the day. Or environment. Maybe there's that family member who really hooks it up in the kitchen. They make something really delicious. So we know them to make that particular thing. So we see them and we're like, okay, that's exactly what I'm craving. Or maybe certain places, bars, restaurants, maybe social gatherings with family members, holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, and then thinking about food. So we might hear a commercial on the radio or see a billboard or see something on TV, and all of a sudden we're craving food. We might smell something and we're like, ooh, that smells so good. Now I want exactly that. Or maybe we just have general cravings throughout the day, things we like to eat. But these are some common triggers for eating. And it's important for us to recognize these triggers so that instead of automatically going for the food, we can say, oh, that's a trigger for me. What brought that on? So think about maybe some other triggers that you have. We also want to reflect on when we engage in emotional eating, and maybe it's not a full on binge, but when we engage in emotional eating, where does it happen? Well, engaging in emotional eating is usually related to feelings of guilt and shame, like we said in session number one. So we tend to engage in these behaviors when we're by ourselves, when we're in private. So think about where that is for you. Is it the living room, the kitchen? Are you in the car, in the driveway, or in your parking space? Um, where are you? People have said maybe it's in the closet. So what not only do we want to know where this happens, but we want to know what are some things we can do to reduce eating in these places when we're not hungry. What are some things you're already doing, or what are some things you can do to prevent eating in these places when we're not hungry? How can we distract ourselves? So I'll give you a moment to think about that. How can you reduce eating in these places when you're not hungry? Some strategies that people have shared are drinking water or doing some sort of physical activity. So maybe if they're in the living room, maybe they march in place, or maybe they have a little peddler, or maybe they do some stretches. If they're in the kitchen, then they might need to take a break from the kitchen because that's where the food is. So they might, maybe they step away from the kitchen. Um, if we're at work, maybe we take a lap. Maybe we talk to some coworkers. If we're in the car, maybe we just don't bring snacks in the car, so that we don't have to worry about that. Maybe we do some deep breathing in the car. So all of these questions are just to make us more aware of our habits. So we want to make a plan for healthy alternatives so that we don't have to engage in eating when we're not hungry. Because someone once told me, it was another wellness coach from Kaiser. She said, if eating is not the problem, or in other words, if hunger is not the problem, then food is not the solution. So if we're tired, then food is not the solution. If we're bored or angry or stressed, food is not the solution. If we're lonely or happy, food is not the solution. But what could the solution be? So we're just going to pick a few of these. How about, since a lot of people mentioned that boredom is a trigger for them, let's start with that. If I am feeling bored, what can I do besides eat? What can I do? Maybe I can exercise. Yeah, I can call a friend. I can plan some activities, take a walk, listen to music. Yeah, anything to make myself less bored. Right. What if I'm stressed? What can I do if I'm stressed? Yeah, stress management strategies are things that we can engage in. So, a lot of those same things, taking a walk, doing some deep breathing, some meditation. By the way, you have access to the premium version of the Calm app as a Kaiser Permanente member. So if you download the Calm app at kp.org/self-care apps, you can get this app at no additional cost, and it's the number one app for sleep and for meditation. So if you want support with that, that's a good one. That can be another time to listen to some music, do some art, or engage in some hobbies. Or what if we want to celebrate? If I'm happy, I can. That could be hard. Celebrations always have food. If I invited you to a social gathering, let's say it's my birthday, and I'm like, come over for a birthday party. You get there, there's no food. We'd be like, what kind of party is this? So we want to plan for that. What are some other ways that we can celebrate when we're feeling good? Um, Maybe we can tell people what we're celebrating. So we can just share that excitement by sharing it with others. Maybe we can do some sort of activity, something active to celebrate, play some games, enjoy the time together. Yeah. So think about these things. Think about what your triggers are and plan for some healthy alternatives. Now let's talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. So, cognitive behavioral therapy is a really powerful tool that's based on the idea that a situation happens that's out of our control. That's life, right? Something happens. Then we have an automatic thought. We start thinking about the situation and interpreting it a certain way. That thought is going to cause us to feel a certain way, which will cause us to behave in a certain way. Now, the cognitive behavioral therapy model is often shown like a triangle because all of these things really go together. But with this process, if we can intervene when we have that thought, if I can change my thoughts, then I can change everything that happens after that. I can change how I feel and how I react. So, this is what we're going to practice doing. So, just to summarize, how a person thinks or perceives the situation affects how they feel and what they do later. So, CBT can help with disordered eating by addressing how we think about food and how we think about ourselves, because then we'll feel differently about food and ourselves and then behave differently as a result. So, just to kind of get this process started, what thoughts do we have about food and about dieting? What thoughts are already there? We want to question those thoughts. That's where we need to start. We're going to question those thoughts. So, some people have thoughts about, okay, I have to clean my plate, or um, that diets are the way that we're going to lose weight, even though diets are temporary, or that we have to be a certain size to feel accepted or to feel beautiful, or that food is a way that we give and receive love. And so to limit our food means that we're kind of it kind of disrupts that idea. So it can be really challenging. And these messages and beliefs, they might come from culture, they might come from media, maybe from our caretakers, our friends. So we want to use our CBT tools to recognize and reframe our thoughts. If I start to think differently about things, then I will feel differently and behave differently. So we're going to check in with our thoughts, how those thoughts make us feel, and as a result, how we want to behave. But then we're going to circle back and question the thoughts and see if there's evidence to support those thoughts. We're going to become thought investigators. And if there isn't evidence to support those thoughts, then we want to change those thoughts. Now, here's why it's so important. All of us have thought distortions. Thought distortions are automatic thinking patterns about ourselves, others, or life in general. And these thoughts are negative, they're judgy, they're rigid, they are exaggerated. But even though they're exaggerated, we're also convinced that they're true somehow. They label things. They're all or nothing, so there's no middle ground. And they ignore the positive things that are happening, so they're only focused on the negative. And there are other names here for thought distortions, like irrational thoughts, automatic dysfunctional thoughts, pessimistic self-talk, whatever you want to call them. Negative thoughts, they're thought distortions. So we are going to look at some tip-off words so that we can more quickly recognize when they're happening, and then we're going to look at some specific thought distortions. Here's how we know that we're getting into these distorted thoughts. If we start using words like always, this always happens, that always happens, I always do this, I always do that, or this person always does this or that every single time, or this person never does this, I never do that. Some common phrases that I hear are, I always fail my exercise plan, or I always fail my diet, or every time I start a lifestyle change, I can't keep up with it, or I'm never able to be consistent. Or there's the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I should have eaten this. I should have eaten that. I should have exercised more. I should have gotten more sleep. I should have made lifestyle changes before I got to this weight. And then the all, using words like all, or nothing, or nobody cares about me. Those are tip-off words because life happens in the gray areas. So these extreme words we know are already distortions. So let's get into some detailed ones. And we're calling these out so that they're easier to recognize when they come into our minds. So all or nothing thinking. Things are all good or all bad. Let's say that I decided I'm going to eat healthy today. So I had a healthy breakfast and a healthy lunch. And then someone at work gave me a cupcake. And I ate the cupcake. I'm like, ah, I blew my diet for the whole day. So I might as well give up for the day. The whole day's a wash. Let's start over tomorrow. That would be all or nothing thinking because let's think about what I did during that day. I had a healthy breakfast and a healthy lunch. So that one cupcake does not get rid of all the healthy things I did that day. Things are not all good or all bad. There's in between. So maybe I ate really healthy and then I had the cupcake. And maybe next time I'll choose not to have the cupcake because it's not nourishing for my body. Now, labeling. So I hear labels a lot. So people will say things like, I'm lazy, or they might use a label related to their weight. When we label things, it means that those things cannot change. It's an idea that that's how things are always going to be. So if I give myself a weight label, then I'm telling myself that that is who I am and it can't change. If I say that I'm lazy, I'm telling myself that is who I am and I can't change. But we know that's not true because you're here in this session, which means you know that you can change. I know that I can change. So we want to take the labels away so we don't get stuck feeling like we can't reach our health goals because we can. We know we can. Think about that kid riding a bike. Just because we might have fallen off the bike, scraped our knees the first time, it doesn't mean that we can't dust ourselves off and get back on that bike and then just be cruising in the future. Fortune telling. This is when we tell ourselves how things are going to turn out before they even happen. So, what's the point of even signing up for the gym? I already know I'm going to waste money on that membership because I'm not going to go. I never go. So we're predicting how things are going to go. Oh, what's the point of even changing how I eat? I'm just going to go back to the way I ate before anyways. We don't know the outcome because there are specific strategies we can use to be consistent and to reach our goals. So by fortune telling, we've already told ourselves that we failed before we even got started. And that can be very discouraging. Our brain hears all these things. We are listening. Someone who is listening, we are listening to these thought distortions. Discounting the positive. Let's say we had a whole list of things to do today, but I didn't get to these two things. Does that mean that the whole day was a waste? I failed the whole day? No. Let's weigh the positive and negative the same. So if I accomplished 10 things, didn't do two things, wow, look at that. 10 things I got done. We should really hype that up. But instead, we tend to focus on the two things that we didn't do. So we want to really celebrate the positive experiences and give them at least the same amount of weight as the other things that we wish we had done. Now, here are some other thought distortions. Emotional reasoning. I feel this way, so it must be true. Should statements. I should do this, I should do that. We're expecting ourselves to be perfect, and as humans, we're not. And then mind reading. Oh, that person looked at me weird, so they must be judging me based on my weight. These things can make us feel discouraged. And what we learned from CBT is our thoughts, they affect how we feel, which then affects how we behave. So if I'm feeling discouraged because I have these negative thoughts, if I'm feeling discouraged, I'm more likely to engage in emotional eating. It's going to affect how I behave. So let's practice. How can we change our thoughts? Let's say that we are labeling things. I slipped up on my healthy eating plan, so I'm a failure. We're labeling ourselves as a failure. What is something else that we could say here? How could we reframe this thought? We might say that I slipped up on my healthy eating plan, but I'm going to get right back to it during the next meal because every meal is a chance for better health. Or I might say, well, I had dessert when I wasn't planning to, but I also had all these fruits and vegetables during the day, and that's a win. Or I slipped up on my healthy eating plan, but I exercised today, and that's a win. So there are lots of ways we could reframe it. And then discounting the positive. I walked today, but not as long as I wanted to. I walked. I walked today. That's how we could reframe it. That's just one example. So take some time thinking about how you might reframe. We are working on developing healthier thoughts. So, what are healthier thoughts? These are thoughts based on compassion, honesty, authenticity. These are thoughts that support us towards getting to where we want to go. We're observing our behavior without judgment, and we're encouraging ourselves to keep going. There's an amazing researcher. Her name is Dr. Kristen Neff, Neff. She does research on self-compassion. Her website is self-compassion.org. And Dr. Neff, her research shows that when we treat ourselves with kindness and grace and patience, we give ourselves patience, that we are more likely to be successful in our health goals than when we're critical of ourselves, when we're blaming ourselves, making ourselves feel guilty. And so it's really interesting. Sometimes we think, oh, if I'm hard on myself, then I'm going to be more successful. But it's really just the opposite. If we're kind to ourselves, then we have that energy that allows us to keep pressing forward. And we give ourselves a chance to be human and we acknowledge it and we learn from it and we move on. So we want to rewire our brain. And think about having a ball of wires and having to detangle those wires and put those wires where you want them to go. That's what we're trying to do here. So it's a lot of work, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of patience, but it's doable. And that's why we're doing it in this space. So rewiring our brain first requires us to be aware of what's happening in here. So we're identifying patterns in our brain. When we notice that we're having thought distortions, we want to name them. We want to identify that thought trap, which is why we gave names to them during this session. And then we want to reframe the thoughts. What is a neutral way to think of this situation that is more factual and more helpful? So once we've reframed our thoughts, we want to visualize ourselves doing things differently. So instead of responding with emotional eating, here it says binge eating, but just emotional eating in general, instead of responding with food when we aren't feeling our best, we want to visualize ourselves doing something else, something that's aligned with our long term health goals. Because when we visualize things, we are more likely to be successful with doing them. There's research, especially in sports psychology, about that. If we visualize ourselves doing something, we will be more successful. And then we want to focus our attention away from the situation. We want to redirect. What are those things that give us value, meaning, and purpose in life, like we talked about in session number 1? Because if we can focus on those things, then we don't need to use food as that temporary tool. So now's the time for you to create your action plan. What baby step do you want to take towards your self care next week? Remember that that plan should be very specific, should be something you can measure, something that is achievable and realistic for you. So it needs to be something that's important for you. And then the timeline is we're experimenting over this next week. So, what will you do? What is one baby step you're going to take towards your self care based on that SMART plan? What will you do? And we're going to check in around that next week. Just as a reminder, we talked about triggers for eating today. We talked about addressing cravings or urges to eat, and the role of our thoughts in contributing to our feelings and actions. That was the CBT model. Next time, we're going to talk about our action plan. We'll talk about body image, self care, and managing emotions without food. So, while we are away from each other, take good care of you, and we will see you next time. Mahalo.